So welcome to another parody webinar. I am Kara Winger. I am Director of Athlete Services for Elites Optimization Services. I also happen to be a javelin thrower. This is Madeline, the K9. And we're here today with a fellow track and field athlete, Lauryn Williams. She's a four-time Olympian, three-time Olympic medalist, and those four Olympics, both summer and winter, were in the span of 1 decade. She's also the first ever American woman to medal in both summer and winter Olympic Games. I have a special vested interest in our topic today. Unfortunately, my grandpa passed away in November. Complications due to COVID. He was 95. It's okay. And surprise to everybody, he left my brother and I some inheritance money. So all of a sudden, I have like my money on my mind and my mind on my money. And I just can't wait to hear about money mindset today. So without further ado, take it away, Lauryn Williams.
All right, let's get this party started. You have to enable screen sharing.
Oh, dang it. Okay, I'm on it. I'm on it. Make co-host. Yes.
All right, there we go. Perfect. Okay, well, Kara already gave me a lovely introduction, so I don't think I need to tell you more about me. I guess the one thing I'll say is that I am now a certified financial planner. So after a career in sports, I decided to figure out how to best be able to help athletes in the capacity that I wanted to, give back to sport, but also other young professionals. So I run a company called Worth Winning, where I help young professionals and also athletes organize their finances. Um, this topic to me is kind of near and dear to my heart as well because I feel like one of the things that I missed out on and I didn't know was important when I was competing in sport was this idea of money mindset. Um, I was going to say, and now that I'm a host, I can see it too. And so I didn't have a very good mindset, even though money was something that I wanted to be organized and I kind of had, good financial habits and was trying to get my finances organized in a way that was going to, best suit me. I also didn't realize like areas where I didn't have a good mindset because of things in my past. So as I kind of started to do financial planning for others, one of the things I learned is that how you think is definitely going to delegate or not delegate, but there's a word I'm looking for. It's going to decide how you actually take action. And as athletes, we know more than anyone that, our thought process, we can be as fit as we've ever been and show up to a competition and not do really well. Well, we don't do really well sometimes because our mind is not right. It's the same thing with finances. And the more and more that I realized that, the more and more I realized I needed to, one, cover this topic before we moved on to budgeting and other things, because sometimes people just can't get over the hurdle of this budget doesn't add up or these numbers don't add up because of their mindset. So today we'll be kind of talking, like I said, all things money mindset. Jump in as much as you'd like. Happy to have the interaction. Like I said, we're a small group. So the first thing we'll talk about is values. And when I think of values, I think of, what are the things that are important to you? So as we sort through what our money mindset is, you first have to know what are the things that are near and dear to you. So if you see over on the right hand side, there's some words, honesty, truth, dependability, health. These are all kind of like sample words, but what are those things that are super duper important to you? Some people would say, honesty is like one of their top values. And if you break that, then they don't want to be your friend anymore. They don't, they're not going to trust you ever again, etc. And they value very much telling people the truth. So you have to kind of figure out what are those things that are important to me. Is it like providing for someone? Is it, experiences? There's all sorts of different things that can be your values, and you need to decide what those are. So as we sit here and think about values, you should name some of the things that energize you. If you don't know, like off the top of your head, how to name what your values are. But think about the things that energize you and then think about the things that drain you. And that will be a good leading path to these are my values. These are the things that are really important to me. And these are the things that, pour energy into my life. And then as you kind of think about the different things that are your values, you might have, does anybody have anything they want to share? Let me just pause there since, like I said, we are a small group of what their value system is. Okay, fair enough.
Oh, can I ask? Oh,
Yeah.
hi.
Hi.
Sorry, my Zoom skills are bad. Um, I was gonna say integrity.
Yeah, integrity, that is a great value. So, doing things that you can go to bed and feel very proud of at night. So you're like, well, Lauren, the next thing says like, how does your spending align with your values? We need to think about what we spend our money on and whether or not it lines up with. So you just gave us the example of integrity. Well, do you use your money to, purchase things that are illegal, as an example? Now you don't think, we really don't go that far in our thought process. You're like, oh, I want to do this thing, and I go and I do it. Or, you may have some sort of thought about values, or that this is not right or whatever. But when you say that integrity is a value, if you think of some things that you purchase, would you say that your spending aligns with your values? Another way to think of it is some people will say, I value very much comfort and stability, privacy. There's all these different terms. So if we thought about like security as a thing, but you spent more than you made on a regular basis, is security really a value of yours if you buy shoes and do this and do that and the other, and it doesn't create any security? It leaves you kind of like, what am I doing? What am I doing? So as we think about things that we purchase, I always tell people to look at the things you purchased over the last 7 days. And if you're really diligent, actually have a worksheet that we do, kind of a longer workshop, where you kind of map out things you purchased in the last 30 days, like big things. Uh, and
Can
then
can I ask, and I don't know if this is majorly off topic or part of it or later, but like, I would say I never spend money, like to the point that it's a fault. And that
mm,
my family gets mad at me and is like, oh my God, like one time I was waiting on buying running shoes, and I was a pro triathlete at the time, and my family's like, buy the freaking shoes already. Is that a value? Is that like the wrong kind of value?
it's not so much a value, but there's something that is your value that is going to say that your spending aligns with whatever that value is. So the value may be something like protection. It may be, some
Oh,
other thing, but you're right. So it's not off topic. It's going to lead to something else that we're going to talk about. I don't know if it's my next slide. We got one more slide before we get to that. I'm going to circle back to it though. I'm not going to forget about it. Um, so then as we think about, values, it's like, okay, this brings up a lot of feeling for me. So the other aspect of this is like, okay, what do I value? What are the things that are important to me? But also, what are these emotions that I am dealing with that are my money emotions? So when we think about dealing with money emotions, we need to describe our feelings that you experience when you think about money. So that could be, well, actually, let me pause again. What do you feel when you think about money? Anybody want to drop in the chat or say out loud?
Anxiety.
See?
oh.
What'd you say, Kara?
I said same, anxiety.
Oh, anxiety. Anxiety. So that's a real money emotion that a lot of people feel. So it's like there's this anxiety that's hanging over my head. What do I need to think about in order to have less anxiety? And why? The why behind, like, why do I have anxiety about my money?
Okay, I'll throw in, like, I'm terrible at spending money because I am afraid. Like I'm afraid because like sport can be so inconsistent, and to make big purchases, it's like, am I, am I going to have a lot coming in or not? Sometimes things are based on performance or other things, and it's not. I wish it was like I feel like normal people where it's like this with money, and sometimes I feel like sport money is like that.
So it sounds like, Meredith, the thing that gives you the anxiety is this, like you said, roller coaster that we're on as athletes. And so what might give you less anxiety is to stabilize your income, which I know is easier said than done as an athlete. But when you have a budget, or some sort of spending plan, you can say like, okay, this is what I have. This is what I will be able to spend this month, next month, et cetera, so on and so forth. And then by breaking it out and saying, okay, this is my monthly spending, I have enough reserves to make it 6 months, that lowers the anxiety level, because it's like, okay, my budget is $5,000 every single month. I got, 5 times 6 is 30,000 in the bank. I know that by 6 months from now, I need to get another 5,000 to kind of keep that rolling amount going. And then you kind of stabilize your income, which maybe will reduce some of the anxiety. But everybody just said something that was kind of like a negative thought. And what I always like to drive home, because pretty much every single time I do this presentation, people are, they say something that is like, like money makes me feel weird. It makes me feel crazy. It makes me feel embarrassed, anxious. That it's okay to have that's normal to have negative money thoughts. Everybody has concerns. Everybody has fear. And what we do a lot of is kind of hiding those emotions, pushing them aside, trying to pretend like we got it all together. Don't worry. There's not a worry or care over here, but everybody is experiencing those things. And sometimes it's okay to even just say like, hey, I have this kind of feeling. What do you feel? And to realize that you're not alone in that is in and of itself sometimes comforting. So to Meredith's point earlier, she was saying, I don't spend a lot, like where is what happens behind that? Why do I, not want to spend? I think that it relates a lot to the money messages that you have heard coming up. So we all shape our money behavior based on something. We've experienced things all through our life, and we've, held on to those memories either consciously or subconsciously. And that is the first area that you need to go and look at as it pertains to figuring out like, how am I going to change my money path if I don't look back? So let's take a moment and go to where we have been. Does anybody want to share what their earliest memory of money was?
My parents are very like, buy things that last, don't just spend frivolously, but they spend on like expensive branding stuff. So I find I'm very bougie with my things that I buy. I shouldn't be.
Is that a new realization, or is that something like you've always realized, like, oh, this is how my parents did it, this is how I like to do it? Because
I've kind of like always realized it. My dad's very like that, like name brand, and I follow in his footsteps. It's bad.
It's not necessarily bad. This needs to be planned for. That's a message. Like, so like you got a message from your dad, and you're also telling yourself a message in light of what you experienced. So that's where, like, you start with the money message of where you've been, and then it carries over into your life. Anybody else want to share? Meredith?
So my parents were pro athletes also, and they played tennis. And so we were always around other people that had massive wealth, mega money. And it was weird. I mean, like, you're around millionaires, you're doing a lot of like millionaire things and millionaire lifestyle, but our family, isn't that, but you're just around it all the time. And I just know, like, I would go to the grocery store to get shampoo, and I wanted the good shampoo, and my family would say, oh no, like, you can't have the good shampoo. It was a lot of that. And I know I, like a lot of people, stress out about money, but I think I have so many negative things that I just never thought about growing up with money.
Yeah. So you feel like maybe some of the messages that you heard growing up have kind of transposed over into your adult life, and that's where, like, now you won't buy yourself the nice shampoo.
Right. I won't buy the good shampoo.
So what can you do to kind of like give yourself a new money message?
That's a good question, Lauren. That's why I'm at this.
So it's all about reframing, the things that we've heard. So first, like I said, acknowledging them, so we all can write down earliest money memory messages we heard. So messages that we've heard a lot of times that I hear, like, money doesn't grow on trees, in for a penny, in for a pound. There's tons of different little things that a lot of people, these cliche terms. put that back or I'm gonna whoop you sort of thing when you're in the grocery store is something somebody has said. And it does shape what your money messages are. Like, I can't have these things. I'm not, deserving of these things. I don't have enough for these things. All those messages that you hear affect the way that you start to spend your money as you grow into adult years. So first acknowledging them, I think, is an important part of the process. And then we got to kind of think about like, well, where we are now. So last question on this slide is about what did you worry about this year? So we're coming off of a pretty unique time period, but yeah, when we think about where we've been, was there something specific that you worried about in 2020?
I'll tell my story, which is nuts. I started out my year in Asia and was on. I swim, but I also coach swimming. Mm-hmm. And so I was on a 2-year contract and left in the early spring because the year was canceled for us racing. And I didn't know what to do. And so I flew to Hawaii I just flew to Hawaii because that's where I've lived for about the last 10 years and was offered jobs and they never started. And so for 6 months I hung out in Hawaii and the money is just going down, down, down. I'm paying for rent, all that. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I basically got to my freak out point. I was like, I don't want to keep losing money. So I asked my family if I can move in with them. And they said, sure. So I flew to Florida and crashed over there and was really fortunate that I'm so blessed. I'm in an empty apartment, but I just moved and started a new job this week in North Carolina. And yeah, it's been nuts because it's like, I mean, it's not the first time that my life's been like this, especially when I was only racing, because yeah, I mean, I do see like maybe I need to start thinking about normal, regular streams of income and things like that. But it's like, I don't know, I've been on a bit of a roller coaster for way too long. Yeah. So I've had a lot of worries just because the money went down, 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 and I don't want that to happen again. So I'm in a just trying to be smart and build faith and get creative about finances and get multiple streams of income. And because I don't know if I'm going to be racing for another year or more. We'll see.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's a really good story of what a lot of people experienced in 2020 is this screeching halt to income coming in, and then a lot of uncertainty. And what do we do when things are uncertain? Yeah, we're gonna panic, even if we have an emergency fund, which it sounds like you did, because like you said, what happens to the emergency fund? It goes down, and then we got an emergency on top of the emergency fund. Because COVID was not, the 3 to 6 months standard emergency fund that a lot of people talk about. It's like it stretched on and on, we're still in it. So we just got to be able to think about those things and always be able to frame them in what did I learn from this experience. So, last year, this happened. This is how I came out of it. This is where I am now, which is a really good segue. There's always something to be learned from whatever we experienced in the past. And it's taking time to think about, this was a negative experience is one way to think about it, but why? You got to ask yourself the why behind, or, this is what happened in the past and why does this stand out to me as something that's important? And how is that affecting where I am now? And then you get to go ahead, Kara.
Oh, I just wanted to share a worry that feels like totally different kind of than the roller coaster. It was like building and building and building over a lot of years. The exterior of my home is like falling apart. It's a disaster and it really needs to be renovated. But they're just, as an athlete, like Meredith's experience, like there was not really extra funds to do that. And I like started worrying about it even more in 2020. So I was like, this is getting past to the point where like, it's not affecting like the walls of my house. Like I need new siding. And I just didn't know where that big chunk of money was going to come from. But my like money mindset shift was just like calling a financial advisor to figure out what the options were.
and there it is. Like you said, it's like, oh, okay, I have this problem. I'm letting it sit. And we also frequently suffer from like kind of that analysis paralysis. It's like, I don't know how to make it rain, so I can't, like, I'm stuck right here. There is no foreseeable answer, but engaging the help of someone else to be able to just even bounce the idea off of, what could I possibly do in order to get where I need to go?
Yeah.
And like you said, engaging a financial advisor to be able to say, hey, what else can I do? And so did you get a solution to your
Yeah, like because of what 2020 is or was, and kind of continues to be in 2021, as far as interest rates are concerned, like I've put enough into my mortgage that I can do what's called a cash out refinance, and my monthly payments would be lower, and I'm just really borrowing against like my already existing loan rather than like coming up with the money outside of that. So that's what the plan is moving forward.
Mhm. I mean, I think it's a really good example of, like you said, making the shift, and how we don't realize like we're stuck in the mud of, how can I change my mindset and just go hard left in a different direction? So,
Yeah.
um,
Towards something you don't even know exists. Like I had no idea that was, yeah.
mhm. Yeah, you create the energy though to know that it exists by simply just reaching out for help. That was a change of mindset because you're kind of like suffering silently prior to, like, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
I guess I'll just let the water damage happen instead of picking up the phone, right?
All right. So when we think about like where we are now, um, obstacles that are inhibiting you from reaching your financial goals. So if we've just done some reflecting, we might have brought some things to light that you acknowledge, but you hadn't really previously acknowledged, and now you're like, okay, here I am, and I have these obstacles in my way. What are the things that are prohibiting you from reaching your financial goals right now?
I'll
For
share.
me, oh, sorry.
Oh, thanks,
I
Meredith.
was saying,
I've been quite quiet in the back, so I figured I'd
I'm
jump
so
in.
sorry.
For me, it was similar to Meredith's situation with kind of this up and down cycle. I was fortunate enough to pay a lot of my debt off in 2014 from being with Team USA. But when you switch nations to a small nation, you start back at zero, not just in status, but in financial support. So over the time going to 2018, like I lived out of my car sometimes at Park City to slide. I have student loan debt because of being in the Team USA programs. I had scholarship, but halfway through both my masters, they cut the program, or I shouldn't say they cut the program, they cut my eligibility because I had excessive degrees compared to people that they were trying to get in that had none. So you go from midway through a master's, not paying, having like a 3.8 GPA, being first in the program, to trying to figure out if you should quit or push through. So for me, it was tackling on debt to get my credit score up because I'm grown and want to have like a house and not live out of suitcases. But what's inhibiting that is it always seems like it's a never ending cycle. So like you're paying off the debt, you're paying it now on time. You even throw chunks of it, but with interest rates and obviously, as we've all mentioned, trying to be an athlete, your money gets split. Like if I could only focus on financials, I could probably chomp this down way quicker and have a better plan. But when you're trying to also pay for training or travel, or like, for example, I have to pay for a $200 COVID test to be able to travel soon. Like that's $200 that could have been a huge chunk towards a student loan. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my battle of, I already have taken the steps to reduce my spending with only the essentials. I have plenty of kit, so I literally burn it out till there's holes in it because it's just not necessary to buy new stuff. Like all my spandex, the crotches are blown out and I just keep rocking them. But, and I'm okay with that. But then it comes to a point where it's like, all right, like I do still have other expenses that pop up and not every single dime could go to these financial goals.
Yeah, that is a really good example of just like, I'm stuck and I'm trying to figure out how to move forward, but the big kind of inhibiting factor there is like the work that I have I can't do without more income, but I can't do the work and get the income without. So you're kind of like stuck on this hamster wheel of when is the season going to start and am I going to perform well enough to earn so that I can continue to tackle my goals. But as an entrepreneur, we're required to kind of like take on some of these expenses in order to cover, our ability to earn. It's like you gotta come out of money, then spend money, and then make money, and then come out of money, and kind of like this rigmarole. Um, yeah, it's a tough situation to kind of sort through um, without figuring out like where I can get additional income, or like you said, like Kara did, she like reached out to someone to figure out like how can I just rearrange things to maybe give myself some relief. It's like maybe feeling like there's no answer, but then someone else takes like a fresh look at it and says like, oh, have you tried blah blah blah, and you kind of fill in the blank there, and now all of a sudden, you're not as stressed because while they're like money didn't just appear out of the sky, there was another possibility. Yeah. Carrie, you want to jump in?
Well, and what's so weird about that is that I called him because I got this inheritance money, like out of the sky. And I was like, I want to use this on my house. And he was like, no, that's not the right way to do it. So it was like, I could have done the cash out refinance like years ago. I just was like my own obstacle in not pursuing like an option that I didn't know existed. But I really thought I was going to like spend this money and never like not get it back, that I had just happened to get from my grandpa. But yeah, it just goes to show that like you have more options than you know about. And it feels so natural to like just rely on yourself, especially as an individual sport athlete, instead of like reaching out for more options.
Yeah, definitely. So as we think about like, where we've been, we reflect on the past. We think about where we are and how where we've been might be affecting where we are. We also need to think about, like I said, some of these thoughts are maybe a little bit negative, but also as athletes, we know that our body is our way of making money. And so I always say like health equals wealth. But there's this idea of what about your physical health may be suffering because your finances are not in, the best of shape. And so we always have to kind of consider too is, our finances are going to impact our mental health, our spiritual health, our physical health. And, we're in a great situation. It could be in a positive way. So, we've been on the kind of like negative roller coaster, but there's also like great money emotions. Some people feel really happy about money and they feel really excited. And, there's all these kind of wonderful things too. But have you considered how like maybe as an athlete, like you can't get ahead or you're not performing well because you feel the stress of competing to make the money so that you can pay the next bill, or like you said, because there's not enough income coming in, I can't compete to the best of my ability, and that also like creates further stress, which raises the cortisol levels, and then we're maybe injured or unhealthy because of it. So I always like to just encourage people that like health equals equals wealth, in the sense of how can we lower our stress levels so that we can actually perform better overall.
So for us,
yeah, go ahead.
For us, the wealth equals health.
Right, exactly. It could be the opposite. If we had more income, but if we change our mindset and decide that money is not going to have a stronghold on our physical, mental, or spiritual being, doesn't overnight improve our financial situation, but the way that we think about the money could definitely lower our stress levels and prevent that injury from happening, or prevent whatever that next thing is that's going to kind of set you off, like blowing up on your teammate. So I kind of think of that as a mental way that like this is unproductive for everyone. And now I have more stress and I can't work past these things. So our mental health is important, our spiritual health, just being stressed out all the time. When we decide like, okay, whether I have money or not, these things are important to me. I value them. And I'm going to organize myself around, making sure that I am mentally healthy, doing mental practices. If you are a spiritual person, doing those things. And, like I said, as athletes, we're pretty much always focused on the physical, but for the normal person, they may not be doing enough exercise or something like that. And two, I think about, where do you need to invest some dollars so that these things are intact? So it's not fun to talk about more money if we're on a limited budget, but if you really need like a sports psychologist to be able to take yourself to the next level, is there something else that you can, give up in the process in order to get access to that thing? Because, those dollars are going to help you actually have better mental capacity to better compete at your sport. Does anybody else have anything they want to share about kind of health and wealth?
Yeah, I completely agree. I was seeing some decline with my stress levels, and after the last games, I started work pretty much full time remotely again. So that adjustment of being kind of half retirement, still half an athlete, Olympic depression, working full time, and then the stress of just bills and being like, I pretty much haven't had a day off outside of my scheduled days off, and most of the time I pick up extra hours in the last 2.5 years, because I'm just like, nope, need a hustle. That 1 hour equals however much amount of money, which adds up to pay this bill. So I definitely saw the decline in my physical health, which wasn't helping me be the athlete I know I can be, or consistently, which, like you said, even if it's not necessarily making you money this minute, we all know that it's an opportunity when we retire to make money. So I had to invest in talking to coaches, or even invest in diving into entrepreneurship solely versus doing freelance work, which when you hire a business coach, like when you see the bill, it could be, it could be as cheap, and I say cheap, it's not cheap, as $3,000. And it could be as expensive. One of my friends literally paid for almost 30 grand. So that was an investment of savings that could have gone somewhere else for her, because she's a pro soccer player. Same for me. I definitely didn't pay 30 grand because don't have it, but investing in yourself that way so that I could alleviate things. I learned so much more about taxes and finances. So rather than being a freelancer, still working for someone else, even though I had self flexibility, knowing that I was completely working for myself was a game changer, even if I had to invest money to in return get money and get mental health out of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. Anybody else have anything they want to share? All right, well, moving on. So as athletes, we definitely know the value of a team, even if you're in an individual sport. But you can have like awesome team members, and you can also have team members that kind of like don't add anything to your life. So as we're thinking about money mindset, and we're thinking about how we're going to change our money mindset, we also, like I said, we kind of talked about like, oh, what happened to me in the past? What am I experiencing right now? Where do I need to invest dollars going forward? We also need to think about like who we're actually surrounded around. So do you feel like you have the right people, and not just the right people, but good influences to help you accomplish your financial goals? Who are your fave five? So there's some people that are coming to mind right now as you kind of like look at me, hopefully. And you're like, like what how are they my fave five? What kind of influence are they having on me? So as we talk about our mindset, if your friend, if your bestie is always talking about how broke she is, and how she wants to do this thing that is not super productive, or she's gonna buy some Louboutin shoes, and there's these things that might be just creating stress. It might not even be that you want to do those things per se, but it may be creating stress around you, because it's like, this is all I ever hear about. I probably should also be shopping to a drop, or buying Louboutin shoes, or what. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. See, you can tell I don't have a pair of those. But as you think about the people that are close to you, and the people that you talk to regularly, you have to kind of ask yourself, are they doing anything to kind of bring me up? Are they a part of my team in this way? And then do we never talk about finances? Are they making poor decisions? Does anybody have anything they want to share as it pertains to acknowledging what their fave five or fave 50, if you're super social?
I guess the saying, if you have to ask. Like, I think we never talk about finances, like, ever. It's like and I think even still now, like, I don't know, it's to a fault. Like, I know I need to work on it, but like trying to find out what other people are making
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, yeah, I guess I'm one of those people just didn't talk about it at all growing up, trying to figure out how people make it work.
Okay. I mean, that goes back to the kind of where, we talked about like, where have you been sort of thing and what's in the past. If it was never
like,
talked about in your household and yeah, go ahead.
My family, because my parents are in their 70s and they just bought like their first house. I mean, like, we're really gypsies, huge gypsies. And so it's like, I would love, so now one of my goals is, and I'm not quite there yet, but it's like one day I would like to own a house.
Mm-hmm.
But it's things like that. I'm not quite sure how to get there yet, which is interesting. But it's also because, like, as a pro athlete and as a coach, my life has been so transient. I mean, I've been around the world a billion times, and I haven't really had a lot of home. And I feel like that takes a toll on finances, because it's probably easier to save if you're staying put in one place rather than always going to an event or moving.
Yeah, that's definitely like a valid kind of thought process, is like, well, how am I gonna, get this home when I'm constantly on the road? I desire to have these things, but at the same time, it's like, what's the path to getting there? And as athletes, we put so much on hold to, like you said, be able to pursue our aspirations and our goals, that sometimes we look back and we're like, oh, wait a minute, I meant to do this over here. And, like, now how do I even get that process going? Because I made some choices that allowed me to do this, but didn't allow me to do that. Do you feel like
exactly? I mean, I have no regrets. I went everywhere. I did everything, but I'm not sure how to get to the financial level. I'm just working on it.
I actually have, maybe Lauren can dive in on the mindset for that, is especially with us I like to travel as well. And sometimes I've been in Vegas for the last years and last year, and I'm already getting kind of itchy to travel and not be in one place. I think it's also compounded with COVID and things, but the house that I'm in was a group investment with my husband and his mother-in-law. She primarily upfronted a lot of the finances, but I run it as an Airbnb. So I look at my home as an investment and income, because I like to travel. So I don't have to be there all the time thinking, well, while I'm over here in Beijing, I still have to pay a $1,600 mortgage, this XYZ. It's more, you're allowing that investment with whatever little money you have work for you almost as a passive income, so that you can live the life that you want to live. And maybe maybe thinking of that step for your journey more that way, rather than being like stationary and coming up with this money to sit stationary, because sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow. Thinking of it more as like an investment as an entrepreneur to live the life you want to live, still traveling and still doing those things, but you have the control to have it as a home base for you.
Wow.
Jasmine, do you want to speak to, since we're talking kind of like Fave 5 or people and good influences, kind of, it sounds like your mother-in-law, is that what you said? And then your husband?
Yeah. We've actually just worked as a family. I primarily hang out with my husband's side of the family, just location wise, and she works as a sales director pretty high up in Marriott. So she runs a lot of hotels and sees their finances. And this is actually the house we bought is her first home, and she's over 50. She's always rented. She had a condo at one point. When they moved, they sold it. And she's been renting and making 6 figures and renting as a single older woman with no dependents sucks in taxes. So she reached a point where she just didn't really have a lot of debt. She worked her butt off to kind of pay that off and get financially stable and independent, but kind of knew that she was losing money, still losing out, especially for her retirement, for her legacy. So because she had more financial backing to kind of join financial groups, I'm more of a social media. I like short bits of information, because after 2 master's degrees, I don't want to sit anymore in long classes, but YouTube is great. There's a lot of like master finance people that, just like Lauren, put out free information. And just by going through Instagram and looking at some of the top rated people with solid information based on what you research, you get a lot of tips on doing your taxes, how to invest, how to change your mindset, and working with people or discussing with people in your inner circle or bringing up the conversation. So for me, I had my own financial goals. So I brought it up as a person to my family and saying, hey, like, mom, what are some of your goals? Do you always want to rent? So then it's not necessarily talking about money. Because I was always taught, like, you don't speak finances, you don't speak politics in public or with people. It always leads to arguments. But I feel like in today's day and age, especially with COVID and things going on, it's a topic like we can't keep silent on. It's very important. You have so many people struggling and not knowing their resources. So asking people their goals of like, hey, do you always want to keep traveling, or how do you always travel? You find out people have remote jobs or they have passive income where at some point they found $1,000, made the sacrifice that obviously could have paid a bill, invested in it, and now they're reaping $5,000, which they take a chunk of that, pay off some other bills, reinvest it. And it's not always about stock, it's just a multitude of different ways. You can join real estate groups where you're literally a passive person that throws $5,000. I'm using easy numbers. I don't mean you have to come up with $5,000 necessarily, but $5,000, and it's a group investment, and they buy an apartment complex. So now you're receiving dividends monthly or quarterly. Plus, after they turn over this business and sell it, you get a lump check. Maybe that doubles your money, or at least you break even. But you can, use those dividends to pay off bills passively without worrying about it. And just talking and discussing those goals with other people is how I've got my circle of mindset. My husband's not really great. He has great goals, but sitting down on paper, he is not the best at like execution. So that's where I come in. I'm the executor, and he's a person that can like look around and be like, we don't need this, we don't need that, we don't need this. Or even my one friend, she wanted to buy a car, and she's like, hey, I'm thinking of buying a car. Can I run this by you? Anytime you're trying to make a financial decision, it's great to have someone to talk to, just to hear you say it out loud and your logic, so that they might have a different perspective. Or even how like Kara had an experience where she's like, I talked to my financial advisor and he was like, do not use the money you have for that. That's a bad decision. Like, it sounds great, but it's not. And just to get that feedback so you can make necessarily better choices for your situation, but also engage in that conversation of finances, because it just seems like money is not a comfortable conversation for you based on your background, and it's very scary, especially as athletes. But the more you talk about it, the more you realize everyone's kind of been in some type of boat like us in their own way, whether they were an athlete or not at all, struggling either with medical bills or whatever. So that would be my advice. Sorry for the rant.
Well, it sounds like, Jasmine, that you have, like I said, the last live was about, the Fave Five, and it sounds like your mother and your husband, and they both been instrumental in being good influences and helping you move forward and move towards your goals. And then also, it sounds like you said, you reached outside of kind of, it's not necessarily a Fave Five, but you started to get information from other places. And then, like you said, I mean, you transitioned right into the next thing kind of pretty easily. Is like this idea of like, even to get that thing going with your mother-in-law and your husband, the conversation had to be had in some sort, form, or fashion. So it's like, these are people that I care about, and I want to see them do well financially, and I've got these goals, and I want to work together. But you didn't just show up at the table and say like, hey, you know what? You shouldn't be renting at 50. I'm trying to do this thing. Like, you're like,
Yeah.
let's get together. It was more of a, let me ask some probing questions
Right.
so that I can get to where I want to go, which it brings to the, how do you have these money conversations? And you also brought up a really good point when you said, you were taught to, don't talk about money, don't talk about politics. I think it's also like sex and religion is the other two things that fit in that bucket. But what we think about when we think about like money and how to talk about money and why we maybe don't have. I mean, we probably all have a fave five, but what we talk to our fave five about, is various different things. It may not be money. The reason is because what we think of when we think of money is how much money do you have? How much money do you make? How much did you spend for that? It's very like dollars and cents oriented. And I think Meredith, you also made mention of it is like this idea of, counting other people's pocket. So like, how did you figure that thing out? And the mindset going exactly to like, how much more do you make than me that you're able to do that and I'm not, sort of thing, versus, hey, what strategies are you using? Because it's not really so much about the dollars and cents behind it. It may come down to once you learn more about the strategy that you find out you need to earn more or something. But just focusing on the, Kara, do you make 100,000? Meredith, do you make 1,000,000? That doesn't move our conversation forward tonight. Or, and I mean, in any setting, like obviously we're not talking that now, but that's not the thing. It would be more like, Kara, what have you done now as a homeowner? Like, what kind of things have you bumped into? What kind of strategies are you using? And then she responds with, oh, well, it hasn't been all sunshine and roses. My house was actually falling apart and I talked to a financial advisor. And then the next person says like, oh, well, what's a financial advisor? And before you know it, a conversation is rolling and it has nothing to do with how much you make, how much you paid for the house or whatever. And you leave with lots of fruitful information. And so as we think about changing our money mindset, it's how can we, take things that we were not traditionally okay with talking about and finding a new way to talk about them that may not have all the barriers that we've kind of mentally put in our head. It's like, I can't ask Kara anything about money because only thing I'm thinking about is how much does she make? The only thing I want to know is how much a javelin make, if you get a medal in the javelin, how much does it give extra? Like, that's the wrong mindset already, which is not going to give us a good conversation, as opposed to thinking of her as, oh, here's a person with a different experience than me. Whether she makes 1,000,000 or $1, I want to know what I can learn from her. And let me see, let me ask these questions about this thing that I'm interested in. So we have to challenge ourselves to have those money conversations and think of creative ways to have those conversations because it's I'm not going to pretend like it's easy to talk to people. I'm still, as a financial planner, trying to get my mom to tell me like kind of like what's going on in her life. Like she's approaching retirement, and she kind of like gives me a little tidbit here, and then she kind of like goes over here, and then she gives me a little tidbit, and then she heads off over in this direction. So though I now have more strategies because I'm doing this on a regular basis, I can't pretend that it works like perfectly every time and that you get the information that you want. But that also goes back to that kind of fave five and whether or not you're bringing people along or people are holding you back. My mom is a wonderful person. I love her, but she's not the one that's like helping me and encouraging me toward my financial goals. Instead, I'm one of her fave five, if you will. At least I'm self-proclaimed. That's kind of encouraging her to reach her financial goals. So it doesn't mean just because someone, like you said, if we go back to the previous slide, that someone who's making poor decisions, you have to just like X them out of your life. And you're like, oh no, Lauren said they're not doing anything good for me. They're not good influence. So I'll never speak to that person again. There may be some people you need to cut out. And you need to be honest and ask yourself some probing questions. But just because someone is not a good influence or is not in a good place right now, doesn't mean that you can't act as that lifter upper. That's the word.
It's a word.
That encourager, yes, that they need to be. And that's kind of like how this business was even born for me. It was this idea that as I learned more about this and decided I wanted to go into financial planning, I wanted to share everything I knew with all the people around me. And it was like very much so like, oh, I learned this about a SEP IRA or solo 401k. I implement it. And then I go tell like my best friend, like, hey, do you have a SEP IRA or solo 401k? And they're like, wait, what? Huh? And I'm like, well, this is what it does. And this is why it's good for you. Because nothing would be worse to me than to get to retirement and I be able to take trips and do all these things and, to have course corrected the things I didn't know by learning these things and then leaving all the people that I care about behind. So you don't need to be a certified financial planner running a financial company to bring people along with you. You have to have a good money mindset. You have to be making the most of the information you do know and sharing that with others. I think that is the thing that we miss out on when we think about money conversations.
Actually, I have a question for you, Lauren.
Yeah.
As Kara mentioned a financial planner. I do know, and this is a question for myself, but in general, a lot of people I do speak about finances are very weary of financial planners because in their head, as much as we know as athletes, you have to invest time and money to get results. In their head, they're like, well, I'm going to pay someone to tell me I have to save money and go through my finances. And how do I know that this is the best person or financial planner to do so, and I'm going to reap the benefits of what they're telling me? Do you have advice on how do you know or a financial planner is good or a great fit for you? How do you research that, and is there like baseline costs that people in their area could kind of be like, wow, these services are not matching up to the cost based on this baseline, etc.?
Yeah. So that is the catch 22, 24, 26, 28. So I'll just kind of do a brief. The financial industry is very vast with various types of financial professionals. And so one aspect of this is about 70% of the industry is made up of people who sell a product and earn a commission for selling that product. So they're going to be very focused on selling you in an investment, getting your money in a Roth IRA, getting you life insurance and those sorts of things, because that's how they make their living. It doesn't it doesn't automatically make them a bad financial planner just because that is their job, but there is a conflict of interest that exists. And so the bad taste that a lot of people have in their mouth, or the leeriness that's kind of been taught as a narrative in lots of financial households, is like, they're just going to sell you something, or you can't trust them because they don't have any knowledge or expertise above and beyond buy this investment because I get paid when you buy this investment. So the three criteria that I would say if you're looking for a financial planner is that they're fee only, fiduciary, and CFP. Now, like I said, you could be a very good financial planner who has read tons of books and very literate and have no licenses. But if you, like I said, if I want to hire someone, I'm not going to go to the person that has no licenses and is like self-taught, because I can't prove that they know these things. You could end up in the hands of someone very good. And that's the thing with the industry, is like I said, there's lots of people without, like, you can wake up in this morning and Kara, you can say you're a wealth manager. Mackenzie, you can be a financial advisor. Meredith, you are a financial coach. And Jasmine, you're a I don't know, financial planner. Actually, you can just say financial planner. Like, all of those are terms that you guys can just start using tomorrow. Certified financial planner, you cannot use unless you actually are. And if you're caught using that term without having that, there's like legal penalties, et cetera, so on and so forth. So, it, like I said, just varies very widely. You want to ask about, like I said, what kind of education that they have, and then them looking at your full financial picture. So, like I said, 70% of the industry is going to sell you an investment product and focus in that area. And that's going to be a thing that they're going to do. They're not going to really have expertise on your student loans and your budget and your house and all the different things that are your financial life. You want to have a kid and you need a 529 plan plus a 401k or a SEP IRA. They're just kind of going to be very basic in what their knowledge is, and they're just going to try to get it, focus on the investing piece of things. So that's kind of a red flag there. Go ahead, Meredith.
Is there a book you would recommend for beginners? I mean, people that like don't know hardly what a Roth IRA and all that is.
No, maybe I should write one, huh?
The book queen doesn't have a book to recommend? What?
Well, and so this is the same thing with like you said, basic personal finance. There's tons of stuff out there, but what's the end game, or where is it all going to lead? I'm going to research Dave Ramsey stuff is really good for beginners.
Pardon, what was his name?
His name is Dave Ramsey.
Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, so he has like a process called like these baby steps, and kind of helps you like focus on getting your first budget and getting things in shape. Like I said, I've read plenty of books, but like even with Dave Ramsey as I'm speaking, I'm like, ugh, because some of the advice he gives is like a hard line, yes or no. So as an example, student loans is something that I hate when he talks about, because Dave Ramsey believes in no debt, period. Pay off your house, pay off your car, pay off your student loans, and how dare you eat anything but oodles and noodles until you do so. Um, that's not how I get down. So, like I said, overall, if you're looking to get started, like I said, it would be good, but also, like I know a lot about student loans. That's part of my expertise. It's not always best for somebody to be trying to pay their student loans down. He's giving very poor advice that's going to inhibit someone's financial future. So to kind of get back to fees, Jasmine, was your question, and what's reasonable. Financial planners are expensive. They are like I call them an expensive necessity, because you need the financial planner, you need this information, and it will inevitably save you more money than what you spend, but it's going to hurt your pocket initially when you are working with someone that is properly qualified to help you. Now, there are hourly engagements. There are, short-term projects that people do. So that's another way to be able to engage with the financial planner, so that you can like, okay, I have some information. Let me go off on my own, implement these things, and then maybe circle back and kind of check in on like, here I am in life, and this is what this is what I've done since then. What else do I need to do? But traditionally, the reason that, like you said, there is a wealth gap in America, and there's like, the richest 1%, and then there's all the rest of us, is because financial planning has been for the wealthy. So the firm that I first worked at, when my first internship, you needed $1 million in assets before you could be a client. So $1 million of assets is investable assets. You need to have $1 million that they could invest on your behalf. That's not counting your house, because you can't invest that. That's not counting your 401k, because that's held somewhere else. You had to have had $1 million sitting in some sort of investment that they could take care of for you before you can be a client. Well, how do I get the $1 million if nobody tells me what I need to do? And it was an awesome firm. They went above and beyond, and I learned more about financial planning there than, I was at the beginning of my career, so I can't say than anything, but it was a great place. And I stand by that to this day, compared to the two advisors I worked with during my career, who did not know and were very focused on those investments that I was just telling you about. So it's like, where do I find kind of a baseline of how I'm going to fit in? How do I get information I need? And it is starting with like kind of personal finance resources, more like the books, courses, and things like that, to get the basics down, kind of accumulate something, and then, say like, this fee is worth it. This is something that is worth investing in, because I know that I don't know everything about this, and that this person spent all the time, and I'm going to optimize my finances. So if we're talking mindset again, if we think about this as athletes, we're world-class athletes. We are really, really good. We have lots of skills inside of us, fast twitch muscles or throwing muscles or whatever the case may be. But what are we without a coach? There are very few athletes that coach themselves. And so if your coach is going to raise fees, you're probably going to, I got to figure out where this money is, because, and it is a hard thing in sports right now, like Olympic sports, they're paid either by a USOPC or their NGB sometimes. People with personal coaches, their coaches are underpaid, and there's lots of, in track and field specifically, they're trying to figure out how to pay the coaches more. And then it's like, well, the agents are already taking 20%. So of course the coach should have at least 20%, because the coach is way more important than the agent. But now that's 40% of the athlete's money going out and so there's this rigmarole that doesn't make it super easy. But I would say for sure, if it came down to the punchline and my coach told me she was charging me $10,000 more or something, I would try to figure out the money, because I know that I can't just go out here and train by myself. It's worth it to me to make that investment in myself, so that I can go out and, be a better version of me. Another example I'll give is just, like real estate. So I think this is a really great example that someone shared with me recently. You want to go buy a house, you go out, you find it, and you purchase it. Like, a real estate agent makes 3% all across the country. So you buy $100,000 house, that's $3,000. And if you're the seller, you pay the buyer and you pay both sides. So it's 6%. So of your $100,000 house you're selling, 6,000 of it is gone right out the gate. And your house may sell in a matter of days, especially with a hot market right now. So you got a $300,000 house, that's $9,000. You just, no, that's not 6 times 3, $18,000 that just left your account in a matter of weeks. How much work did they do for you? We don't ever see the cost. Like, we don't ever think about that for that. Like, you're just like, I just got to get it from underneath this house. But you paid somebody $18,000 for maybe 20 hours of work. That's a pretty high price tag if we look at it hourly. And I think that's what we do when we look at financial planners is like, oh, well, your fee is $2,000. Like, what am I gonna get for 2,000? You know, what if I can fix your problem and save you $2,000 over the course of the however many times that person, you know, I just made that number up, but we need to start thinking about it differently so that you can understand the value of this is an investment I'm making in myself so that I can be better in the future. I know that was a little bit long-winded answer. So yeah, so I'll just finish up here. I know we're running over time. So as we think about mindset and we think about changing things and think about what we want to do, so the get rich or die trying sort of thing is, you know, we also need to think about like what happens if we pass away. So there's the estate planning aspect of it, which is the financial planning part of it. But as we think about money mindset, if today was the end, what would you regret not having done? And what's holding you back from doing those things? So we talked about, you know, money, things that you've experienced in the past, money mindsets and messages that you've heard that might be stopping you from being able to move forward. And what does that end up leading to is regret. If we don't ever get out of this paralysis, if we don't ever acknowledge what's inhibiting us right now, what obstacles are in our way, so that we can get going and make some changes in our lives so that we don't die with any regrets. You know, there's tons of things that we want to do and want to see and want to be, but as it pertains to our money, how can we change our situation? Like for a lot of people, it's always wanting to leave something behind. I don't want my husband to be, you know, desolate or to struggle without me because that's not an additional income. I don't want my kids to, you know, not be able to go to college, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about like, how can I put myself on a path and get over the things I was told in the past to be able to take advantage of right now and look really good in the future. So then the last thing I would just kind of challenge you all to do is, you know, work through what your priorities are. As athletes, like I said, we know a lot about this. Make some to-do lists. Like I said, write down the things that are your money behaviors, write down the priorities that you have, and then think about what you can do to make changes so that you can have the life you want. You know, Meredith, you talked about a lot of different goals and things that you want. And we also talked about some obstacles. So what can you do to make meaningful change in your life so that that's not a thing that's going to continue to hold you back in the future?
It's a big question. Thanks.
It definitely requires some marinating on, but if we don't do that reflection and we're constantly just kind of living in the moment, tackling what's next, we never make a plan. And then we never, you know, we keep looking back like I'm not accomplishing my goals. It's because, you know, the same way, like as an athlete, we need X amount of practices, then we need X amount of competitions, and then, you know, the championship is going to be in sight. If we don't ever start the practice part of things, then there are not going to be good competitions. The good competitions are going to be poor, or if the competitions are poor, we don't make it to the championship. You know, in terms that we understand, we can just flip that over and say into money, what are the baby steps I need to take on a daily basis that are practice that, you know, make me sore, make me tired, you know, I don't like very much, but I know that by doing them each and every day, saving this $5 or whatever the case may be, I'm building a foundation so that I can get to good competitions, or, you know, in that form, that might be the emergency fund, or that might be the down payment for your house. And then from good competitions to good championships. And I would say for most people, that's retirement, having enough to be able to, you know, stop working because you saved up. If that's what you want to accomplish, then you got to start by working backwards. So then the past year, what would you change about the past year? If there was something you could change. So we talked about, you know, kind of 2020 throwing us off for a loop. Oh, my mouse is lost somewhere. And if 2020 threw us for a loop, you know, how can we focus on something in 2021 to help us like be able to move forward. So we look back on 2020, there are lots of learning opportunities. And I want to challenge everybody to, figure out like what you can learn from 2020, because there are those things. And then how can I take what I learned and use that in my next year coming up? Okay, my mouse is completely, I can't find the mouse. Oh, I found it. Sorry, I was like, I can't get to the last slide. I'm trying to finish, I swear. All right, so like I said, as athletes, we know goal setting. So you write your story, go ahead and write them down. Like I said, you've got lots of things to think about tonight. Where you came from, messages that you heard, memories that you have, dealing with those things and how they relate to where you are now. And then once you get to the present, we also want to look into the future. So write down your 1-year goals, your 3-year goals, your 5-year goals. And implementation is key. We can sit and listen and kind of commiserate with one another or connect with one another and encourage one another. But ultimately, what do we need to do? We need to put action behind it. So to not write any of these things down or not to take time to really reflect on them is not going to lead to action, because if they're thoughts in our head, they don't become realities until we make them real. So tell a friend something you want to do. Tell a friend something that you experienced in the past. Write it down. You've got to find a way to turn all these things into tangible things to prompt you to move forward. So I'm going to shut up with that and turn it back over to Kara.
I lost my mouse for a second. Thank you. Thank you so much. Lovely money mindset with Lauryn Williams. I so appreciate your time and everyone that showed up tonight. We're trying to see if evening works better for more people to come to these webinars. So yeah, I learned a lot. As a fellow female athlete, it's really neat to maybe consider that some of our Fave 5 might come from the parity community eventually, because we're having these conversations already. So very fun to learn together and hopefully make all the money together and then invest it and reach all of our goals in the future. So
yes, last thing I'll say as a sort of plug for myself is my podcast. So it doesn't market to people. It really is just about having money conversations, which is what we did a lot of talking about tonight. So I bring various guests on and they tell their money story. So, like you said, if you don't feel like you have a Fave 5, maybe just listening to the stories of other people and realizing like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person with inconsistent income. I'm not the only person with debt. I'm not the only person whose house is falling apart. You name it, people are, they're just coming on and they're sharing whatever their experiences are, good and bad, how they're getting themselves out of debt, how they put themselves through school, etc., so on and so forth. So, and I'm starting a series this year with another financial planner where we're going to kind of just break down some of the kind of schemes and money myths and things. So like the episode we recorded yesterday is going to be home buying. The good, home buying versus renting, because one of the things you hear all the time, the myth that we're kind of busting is like, I'm throwing away money by renting. Everybody always says that. That's kind of like a catchphrase. But are you really? And so we talk about like why that's not necessarily true. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy a home, but you're not necessarily throwing away money by renting, and what you need to think about. So I encourage you guys to download the podcast, listen, and yeah. Also, if you want to be a guest, you're welcome to.
Ooh, I've listened to a few episodes and I also highly recommend. You all experience the accessibility and personableness of Lauryn Williams, and it's the same listening to the podcast. So there you go. You will receive an email asking for your feedback on our webinar tonight. And please respond, fill it out, tell us what you think. We'll do more in the future and hopefully build on this one.
Nice. Thanks, guys. That was awesome.